Well, good morning, everyone. Really excited that you guys took about 60 minutes out of your Sunday to come and hang out with us this morning. So really excited about that. I kind of want to jump right into things. I'm gonna read to you from the book of Jonah. And if you've never read Jonah, heard about Jonah and the whale, let me just give you a spoiler alert. At the end, this guy gets swallowed by a whale, right? And so it's a good one to read to your kids and say, hey, this is what happens when you disobey God. You will be eaten by a whale. But no, so it's a good story, and I kind of want to jump right in here. But to set things up, so Jonah just kind of appears on the pages of Scripture, and God tells him, hey, I need you to go to this city called Nineveh and preach. And Jonah knew about Nineveh, and Jonah knew that, okay, Nineveh is a very evil and wicked city. So Jonah really didn't want to do what God said. And so, like a lot of us, whenever God tells us to do something, we don't do it. And sometimes we go in the opposite direction. And that's what Jonah does. So God tells Jonah, okay, I need you to go to and preach in this city called Nineveh. And so Jonah's like, no, they're evil, they're wicked, and so I'm going to go in the opposite direction. And Jonah even buys a ticket to board a ship and go in the complete opposite direction. So we're going to jump in here to verse 4, and this is God's response to Jonah fleeing him and running away from him. So verse 4 says, Then the Lord sent a great wind to the sea, and such a violent storm arose that the ship threatened to break up. And so the storm was so heavy that the ship really couldn't even hold it. It was about to fall apart. All the sailors were afraid, and each cried out to his own God. And they threw all the cargo into the sea to lighten the ship. But Jonah had gone below deck, where he laid down and fell into a deep sleep. The captain went to him and said, How can you sleep? Get up and call on your God, and maybe he will take notice of us, and we will not perish. And so you may be thinking to yourself, okay, this is kind of a cool story, but how in the world is this going to help me dealing with my crazy family and dealing with difficult people in my own life? And so I kind of want to look at this from a little bit of a different angle, an angle that was introduced to me not long ago. And I want us to put on the shoes of the captain and the sailors, because all of a sudden they were going through a storm in their life, not because of anything that they've done personally, but because of someone that they allowed in their lives. All of a sudden, they were going through this crazy storm, a storm that was completely shaking their life, and it wasn't really because of anything that they've done personally, but it's because of someone that they let on their boat. And so today I want to talk to you on the topic of necessary endings. Necessary endings. There's a book by Dr. Henry Cloud if you want to dig into this topic deeper. And actually, we may probably will revisit this topic later because it's just so important to end things in our lives, because life has a way of overproducing sometimes, and we'll just have to end things. And so really the idea is just, in order for us to experience the best things in life, sometimes we're going to have to put an end to certain things. Even though they might be good, sometimes we may have to put an end to them in order to experience better things. And to really drive home this point, I want to look at a couple examples, right? And so let's look at this first example here. American Idol, right? Okay, anybody have any clue how many seasons American Idol had? Anybody, just shout it out.
18.
Not quite. 15 seasons. 15 seasons American Idol went. And
Don't be proud of that.
right, he's like, 15, I know. Right, Jacob tried out a couple times. But all 15 seasons, in fact. Didn't quite get the hint. But anyway, so yeah, American Idol, everybody knows that the tryouts were the funniest part, at least to me. And so it was kind of this thing that's like, okay, you're kind of beating a dead horse here. Something has to come to an end in order for some things, like The Voice, America's Got Talent. If you're into the British, isn't the X Factor like British, whatever? And so in order for some things to come back, to better things to come to life. And so just an example of one thing that had to end. Let's look at the next thing. The Bowl Championship Series, the BCS. So if you're a sports fan, you're going to get this, but let me bring everyone else up to speed. And so what this was a computerized really system that generated the best college football teams in the nation. And so no human opinion went into this at all. And so at the end of the season, a computer program would generate number 1 and number 2, and the number 1 and number 2 would play for a championship at the end of the year. And see, that the problem with this was that number 3 or number 4, they could be playing really good football at the end of the year, and everyone could be like, man, they're looking like the best team in the country right now, not number one, number two. And so there was just different formulas, different polls that this computer would use to generate these programs. And so it was just, although it served us good for many years, now we have a committee, a college football committee, actual human beings deciding on who plays for these national championships. And there's a playoff. And so much better system, a system that was good for a while, but had to come to an end in order for something better to come. Let's look at the next one. How about these ugly wooden vans? Anybody know the van, the year, make, and model?
84.
84. There we go. Yeah, he knows. I'm pretty sure that we had. If we didn't have one of these growing up, at least we didn't have the wood siding. I don't know. We may have had a wood siding one. Yeah, and so these things, man, just ugly. At least ugly now. They may have been good looking at the time, but now we look back and like, oh my gosh, these things are so ugly. Let alone dangerous. I remember going down the road sometimes and the light would be on because the side door was open. My dad would just be like, just crack it open, and he would literally slam on the brakes to propel this thing forward. And it's like, man, if my hand was in there, see ya, like I don't have no hand. And so now you have a button, and it slowly and safely shuts. And Michelle and I were even watching TV not too long ago where we actually saw that these new Chrysler vans have a vacuum built into them. I was like, man, how much would we clean our cars if we actually had a vacuum built into it? And so something that was good at the time, and I guess maybe was good looking at the time, had to come to an end in order for something to better. What about the next one? Just a vinyl record, right? These vinyl records. Anybody know the first year a vinyl record came out? No one's probably going to get it. 1948. First vinyl record came out, and I think there were about 5 to 7 songs on one side. You flipped it over, and you got another 5 to 7 songs. Something that was good at the time, but now I have hundreds of thousands, if not millions of songs at my fingertips at a moment's notice, no flipping, no anything. So something, again, that was good at the time, had to put an end to it in order for something better to come along. Hope we're all up to speed on that. And so, again, the real idea of this is that in order for us to experience the best things that God has for us, we're just going to have to put an end to some things. Put some things to an end. Again, life has a way of kind of overproducing sometimes. We'll have a lot going on, and we might just have to know what to put to an end in order to experience the great things. And so during the holiday seasons, Thanksgiving is this week. Holy crap, Thanksgiving. So you may be someone who's like, okay, I got to make sure the turkey's good, house is decorated, all the fake fall leaves are out in the living room, so everything's looking nice. And I got to check on my sister to make sure she doesn't mess with the stuffing recipe I gave her because she insists on tampering with it all the time. And so you maybe have this huge to-do list with Thanksgiving and Christmas coming up, but I think especially during the holiday season, maybe you need to put together a stop doing list. Okay, I got all these things to do, but my life is kind of crazy right now, and maybe I'm going through a storm, and maybe I've invited certain people in my life, and I've got these certain habits, and I need to make a stop doing list in order against a to-do list. And here's what we will just never experience the best things in life until we put an end to the bad. We will never experience the best in life until we put an end to the bad. And see, the reason some of us feel stuck in life, maybe you're like, okay, holidays feel the same every single year. I just struggle to get through it. My family's a drag. They're all nothing but a bunch of Debbie Downers. My drunken Uncle Billy comes every single year and just makes life hell. And I just can't seem to get over it. And so I think what God's trying to tell us is that we need to grow a backbone and put an end to certain things. That's often why we feel stuck, is because we refuse to put an end to certain things. And see, here's one. There's certain things that you got to put an end to in order for you to grow spiritually. If you want to grow spiritually, you're just going to have to know how to put an end to certain things. Maybe you're someone who you have a hobby or a lifestyle that causes you to miss 30 Sundays in a year. And you got to have the kids out of church, or you got to, and it goes so much further beyond church. Maybe, like for me, I like to play basketball a lot in the mornings, and I'm with some guys who, they're trying to grow their relationship with Christ, but they'll come to basketball in the mornings and they'll have their suit and stuff with them, and they'll take a shower there and just go straight to work. And like, man, I'm having a hard time finding time with God during the day. It's like, hello, you wake up at 6 in the morning to come play ball every day. Maybe you should start cutting some things in order to experience some spiritual growth in your life. And so I don't know what that is for you. It could be something that takes you away from church. Could be something to take you away from some spiritual growth, some quiet time with God. Maybe you have to quit your job. I know that I have a buddy named Justin, and he worked with me at the church I was previously working at, and he was volunteering for me, and we were working with middle school students, and I was like, man, he kept telling me, he's like, man, I feel stuck in my relationship with God. I feel like I keep growing, and I just hit this ceiling, and I can't seem to break through it. And I'll feel like I'll grow, and then I'll take a couple steps back and grow again, but I just never get over this one point. It's like there's a ceiling. And I was like, okay, let's break this down. Let's talk about this. So we were looking at his life, and he's like, well, I can't really volunteer because my work requires me to work every other week. He worked at a nursing home. And so he's like, that's just the way things are. You have to work every other week. There's nobody special that can do that. And I was like, well, man, I feel like this may be God telling you, hey, how serious are you about your relationship with me? Are you going to be serious enough to walk up to your boss and listen, I need my Sundays? Are you going to have enough backbone to walk up to your boss and say, my relationship with Christ is more important to me than making money. And so if you can't make this happen to me, I'm going to have to walk. Like, Justin, I know that you got, tuition and you got to pay your car bills and everything like that, but are you going to trust me enough to see that this could be the thing that's putting the ceiling on your spiritual growth? And are you have enough backbone to walk up to your boss and say, hey, I need my Sundays, I'm going to have to walk? And are you going to trust me enough to take care of you if that doesn't go the way that you planned? And so he did, and by the grace of God, his boss was like, and this is another sermon series, but because he worked so hard and was always kind and was the hardest worker in the room, his boss was like, we can't lose Justin. And so he was like, okay, you can have your Sundays. But again, that's a sermon series for another day. But what is it for you? What do you feel like is making you feel stuck? Maybe it's a relationship. You feel like you need to end a relationship. And before I go any further on this, I want to make sure that nobody goes home and is like, wow, Pastor Marshall's up there condoning divorce. Wrong. Jesus makes it very clear that God hates divorce. And so not that there's not grace there for those who have, that's part of their past, but I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about is not ending your marriage, but ending your behavior in your marriage. That's what I'm talking about today. And so maybe it's ending a relationship with a coworker where you just constantly gossip about your spouse and gossip about the relationships that you have in your marriage instead of talking face to face with your spouse about the real issues that you have in your marriage. Does this sound familiar to anybody? I have a friend who she was a newlywed, and she had to put some boundaries in her marriage because all the women in her family would really just gossip about the men whenever they would get together for holidays, and they would just, it would just kind of be in isolation. And she'd realize, hey, if my marriage has a shot, I have to put boundaries here because this is not healthy. If I constantly participate in this, it's going to tear my marriage apart. And so she recognized it, and she set boundaries. And so maybe it's not necessarily something that you have to completely cut off. You just have to set boundaries and consequences there. Okay, I'm going to set a boundary, and if you break that boundary, then there has to be consequences for it. Is it a relationship? Is it a behavior that you need to end that's causing a storm in your life? And see, endings are essential if we plan on thriving in life. And again, we have to develop courage to end things, or we're just going to remain stuck. And see, oftentimes I find myself thinking, okay, God, if you knew that this was serious to me, if you knew that I really wanted to grow and I didn't want to go through this storm, Why wouldn't you just end this for me? And I believe it's because God won't do through a miracle what we could do through obedience. Maybe you need to take some scissors and cut up some credit cards. Maybe you're in a storm because you're just drowning in debt. And I know this is a touchy subject for a lot of us, but maybe you're praying, God, if you could just drop a $10,000 check in my life, this storm would go away and I'll feel a lot better. But God's not going to accomplish through a miracle what you could accomplish through obedience, what you could accomplish through budgeting, and what you could accomplish through some discipline. And see, depending on the season that we're in, may determine the things that you have to end. Like, I'm married now, and so I can't hang out with the boys every Friday night. I'm married, and so just the fact that I'm in this new season, just got married in May, I'm still learning. There's certain things that I just have to cut off. Married Marshall can't do the same things that single Marshall could do. I recently, and this is the type of stuff that breaks my heart. Michelle and I heard about a couple who got divorced only after 9 months of marriage. I know I'm spending a lot of time on marriage just because I believe God wants us to take care of that. But this couple got divorced after only 9 months of marriage. And we're saying, how in the world could this happen? And it's because he didn't realize that he's married now, and there's certain things, and you just can't hang out with the boys as much as you used to. And so he'd go over here, and he'd spend all of his time with his boys, and he'd talk, and his boys would be like, man, that girl, she's just always a nag. Why don't you just get rid of her? There's a girl that will allow you to hang out with us more often, and watch the game with us, while she's over here going to her parents and talking about relationship problems with them, and they're over here saying, oh, honey, just leave that. He's obviously not the man that we thought that he was, and so leave him while you have enough time to find Mr. Right. Now, in that situation, does it sound like there's a couple things that need to come to an end? And so I don't know what it is for you. Maybe it's a relationship. Maybe it's an activity. Maybe it's a possession. Maybe you need to sell a car. Maybe you need to sell a motorcycle. See, I've seen so many guys spend so much time on their car. I'm like, man, if you'd spend half as much time on your car as you do in your marriage, you'd have the best marriage in the world. So what is it for you? Is it an attitude? Maybe you think if I were to approach my husband about getting stuff done without this condescending negative tone, then he'll never get it done. And maybe it's something you guys need to talk about. Is it a habit? And so, okay, I want to jump back into Jonah here. And at this point, the sailors know. I'm skipping ahead a couple verses for the sake of time, but at this point, the sailors know that Jonah is the reason they're going through a storm. So again, picture Jonah as this, whether it is a relationship, a person, or a habit, or a credit card, or whatever it is. Okay? So this is Jonah, still chapter 1, verse 11. It says, the sea was getting rougher and rougher. The sea was getting rougher and rougher because, see, they kept delaying what they knew they needed to do, which was cut it off. So the sea was getting rougher and rougher. So they asked him, what should we do to make the sea calm down? Verse 12 says, then pick me up and throw me into the sea, he replied, and it will become calm. I know that it is my fault that this great storm has come upon you. Now let me just take a second. The thing that's causing a storm in your life likely isn't going to come out like Jonah did and say, hey, your credit cards, I'm the reason that your life is crap right now. Or your coworker, hey, I'm just letting you know, I'm the reason that your life kind of sucks right now. Just letting you know. I'm the reason that you're going through a storm. That thing likely isn't going to come out like Jonah did and said, hey, you just got to cut me off and your life will be great again. And so 13, check this out. Instead, the men did their best to row back to land, but they could not, for the sea grew even wilder than before. And so here we see them again, continuing to delay the inevitable. They knew. Jonah even came out and said, if you want this storm to go away, you got to cut me off. If you want your life to calm down and experience some peace, you have to cut me off. But yet they refuse, and this is where it applies to us. They refuse to surrender it to God. And they're like, you know what? I'm going to control this. I know, God, I know that I need to trust in you and cut this off, but that takes so much faith that I don't even know that I have. So I'm going to do what I can to row myself back to shore. And so, does that sound familiar to anybody? You know what you have to do, but yet, look, and this is the third time. Earlier we read that they threw all their cargo overboard. The very thing that was going to make them a profit once they landed, they just threw off. And so I don't know what that is for you, but maybe you're someone here today and you're like, I know what I need to cut off, but I can't. And here you're throwing other things off, other things out of your life. You're cutting the wrong things off. Whenever God's like, no, this is the one that you need to cut off. So where was I here? But they could not, for the sea grew even wilder than before. Then they cried out, Lord. Then they cried out to the Lord, please, Lord, do not let us die for taking this man's life. Do not hold us accountable for killing an innocent man. For you, Lord, have done as you have pleased. Verse 15 says, then they took Jonah. Then they took those credit cards. Then they told that coworker, we need some space. Then they took those credit cards and cut them up. And then they took Jonah and threw him overboard, and the raging sea grew calm. They finally did what they knew they had to do all along. So the thing that was causing their life to be crazy, the very thing that was causing a storm in their life, they finally decided, all right, God, we're cutting it off. And look what happened. The raging sea grew calm. You know why a lot of us don't do this? Is because we're fearful. You may think, I don't have the ability to do what I need to do in this next season without this in my life. Maybe you're thinking, I don't have the financial stability to get through the holidays without these credit cards. I don't have the financial stability to pay for all these gifts without this. And so you may be afraid. But here's what I feel like God is trying to tell each and every one of us today, including myself, is every battle that you face from this moment on is because you chose to cut something off, God will be there to strengthen you through it. Every single storm that you go through, every single battle that you face because you chose to cut something bad off, God will be there to strengthen you through it. I want to take a look at this verse in Hebrews. And the author of Hebrews says, no discipline seems pleasant at the time, but painful. So God's trying to tell you, hey, this very thing that you're struggling to cut off, it's going to be hard. God's saying this, it's not going to be easy. In fact, it's going to be painful. Whatever God's whispering to you right now, hey, this needs to come to an end, God's letting you know it's not going to be easy. In fact, it's going to be painful. But he goes on and says, later on, however, it produces a harvest of righteousness and peace. Righteousness, which means being right with God, and peace. Can anybody use some peace right now? For those who have been trained by it. And notice that word trained. It's not for those who just do it once. For those who have been trained by it. And for those of you who maybe you're into the Olympics or something like that, Michael Phelps, that dude doesn't just get off the couch day of the Olympics and roll his neck out and do that cool arm flap thing that he does. No, he trains. He wins all those gold medals because he trains himself. And if you choose to train yourself in the area of discipline and cutting certain things off, you will produce a harvest of righteousness and peace. You will have so much peace in your life if you learn how to be disciplined in cutting certain things off. And so let me ask you today, what do you need to cut off? What do you need to scale back on? I really believe that God is talking to everybody. It may not be as big as some of the things that I've talked about. Maybe it's just something little. Maybe it's just music. Maybe you need to change the music you listen to. I've gone through that. And before I close, I want to point out one more thing. In verse 15, it says, "Then they took Jonah and threw him overboard, and the raging sea did what? It grew calm." And if there's one characteristic about something that grows, is that it takes time. And so you may cut something off. You may go home before the sun sets and cut something off, and you may not see it immediately cease in your storm. And so I just want to encourage you, there's a good chance whenever we do something big for God that the devil's going to be right behind him, whispering in your ear and saying, "Hey, you cut the wrong thing off. God, you misunderstood God. That was just you talking to yourself, and you cut the wrong thing off, because see, your storm's still going on. But what you got to understand is that it will grow calm. You may not see it right away." And so I just want to encourage you, whatever that is, your sea will grow calm. So I hope that whatever God is telling you today, that you take action on it quickly. Because Satan loves a procrastinator. He loves for you to put things off. And so if it's something that can be done, I want to challenge you guys, before the sun sets, put some things to an end. Let me pray for us. Jesus, I thank you so much for being with us this morning. You're not a God who is absent. We have to talk about you like you're not in the room, but you are in the room with us, Jesus. So I thank you so much for that. I thank you so much for talking to every single one of us. I pray that we would have the strength to hear what you're trying to say. I pray that not only we would hear, but we'd be doers of what you're telling us to do. God, I know that this can be some of the hardest things, putting things to an end. Maybe it's a relationship that we've had for years, but we just see that it's causing a storm in our life. Maybe it's an attitude that we just don't know how to break. Maybe it's a habit. God, whatever it is, I pray that you would give us the strength to do as you say, so that we can grow even closer to you. Jesus, I pray all this in your name. Amen.